Task 16 is going to look at whether a verb is acting like a gerund, a participle, or a verb. This is a cut and sort activity, so you're going to want scissors and glue. After you watch the screencast, you can do that cut and sort part. So we're going to do a little review of notes, just reviewing what we know, so that will help us when we go to do the activity. So we have to know what is a verbal. It's a verb, hence the name verbal, that acts like a noun, adjective, or adverb. If I go too fast, you can always pause the screencast and fill in the notes. What does a noun do? Well, in order to understand what a noun is, we have to know what a noun does. It names a person, place, or thing in this case, and it can do the job of the indirect object or direct object, predicate noun or a positive, subject or object of the preposition. Okay, and these are gerunds. What does an adjective do? An adjective modifies or describes a noun. Tells what kind or which one, gives more description. These, if we find them, these verbals are participles. And then what does a verb do? A verb shows what the subject is doing. Many times it's an action, or if it's our linking verb, we call it or a state of being, which is just a fancy way of saying existing. And in this case, if we find a verb being used that way, then it's actually a verb. So verbs can be gerunds, verbs can be participles, or verbs could just be verbs. So in labeling, we got to go through and know our sentence pattern. Subject plus action verb plus do. We ask whom or what. If I have a sentence that still has some extra words after I've found a direct object, then I might have an indirect object. And that question would be answering to whom or what. If I don't have an action verb, I might have a linking verb. A linking verb can be followed by a predicate noun that goes back and renames that subject, or a linking verb could have a predicate adjective that goes back and describes that subject. So we said these are gerunds. Well, what is a gerund? It's a verb plus ing, and it acts like a noun. What is a participle? Well, it can be a verb that ends in ing or ed if it's a past participle verb, and it acts like an adjective. So on the flip side of this paper, you have a chart that looks like this, and we've got gerund, participle, or just a plain old action verb. And then you have another paper that has the dotted lines that you're going to cut out. It says use the markings that we've done in class to help you identify the sentence pattern for each sentence. Highlight, bracket, label, do everything that you can. Then cut out the squares and put them in the correct column of the chart. So I'm going to just start with the first example. The man sitting in the lounge chair is my neighbor. So the first thing I would do is go look for phrases, and I see in the lounge chair. And then I'm going to look for my subject. Looks like it's the man. Now, if it said is sitting, I could see that the man is sitting, but that's not what it's saying. It says the man sitting in the lounge chair is my neighbor, and I know that is a verb. It doesn't have another verb after it, so it must be being used as a linking verb. So I've got a subject and a linking verb. Now I'm going to look for, is there a predicate noun that renames the man, or an adjective after it that describes it? The man is my neighbor, and that's a noun, so I've got a predicate noun. So now I'm going to go look for my verbal. I'm looking for a verb that ends in ing or ed, and I found it here. It's sitting. Well, I've already labeled the jobs of the nouns that it could be doing. If there was a comma after here, maybe this could be in a positive, but it looks like it's describing the man. And it's not just the man sitting. It gives me more description about where he's sitting. He's sitting in the lounge chair. So this one has to be a participle. So I'm going to cut it out, put one little teeny tiny dot of glue here, and glue it under the participle column. And we've done a couple of these activities, so I'm not going to model that for you because I think you should know what to do. All right, let's look at the next example. If I don't get an A on the test, my parents are grounding me for a month. So I'm going to start by getting rid of phrases on the test for a month. And I can already tell that this has a dependent clause because it's got if. So if I don't get an A on the test is a dependent clause. And I don't see a verb that ends in ing or ed anywhere, so I'm going to ignore that part of the sentence and come over here. My parents are grounding me for a month. So I see grounding. So I'm going to look for the subject. Who or what's the sentence about? My parents. And I'm going to look for, like, what are they doing? Well, I see the verb are. Is there a word after it that's describing my parents? Well, parents, grounding doesn't describe my parents. It might describe me. It doesn't rename my parents. I think are grounding, that's the action that my parents are doing. They are grounding. They're doing, the subject is actually doing this action of grounding whom or what? Grounding me. So in this case, grounding is actually being used as a verb. It's not describing anything, and it's not doing any jobs of a noun. It's actually the action. So I'm going to cut this one out and glue it under this column here that says plain old action verb. All right, I'm going to do one more with you. I fed the cat prowling around the alley. So I look for a phrase, and I see around the alley. I'm going to go look for my subject. Who's the sentence about? It's about I. What did I do? I fed. That's an action. So I'd ask, I fed what? I fed the cat. So now I'm going to look for I haven't found it yet. I haven't found the verb that ends in ing or ed within these jobs. And I see it over here, prowling. Now, since there's no comma after cat, this can't be in a positive. It's not going to be an indirect object because it doesn't come before the direct object. So I think it's describing the cat. Which cat am I talking about? The cat that's prowling. And is it just prowling? Which prowling cat? Where is it prowling? It's prowling around the alley. So this whole thing acts like a participle. So this is my participle. I'm going to cut it out and glue it under the column for participle. I actually did not mean to do two examples that were both participles. So now let me see if I can find one that is a gerund. All right, let's look at this one. After crossing the finish line, the marathon runner ate 5 massive hamburgers. So I'm going to look for any phrases, and I see after crossing the finish line. And I can already tell that I found my verbal here. Crossing is a verb that ends in ing. And because it's in a prepositional phrase, I know it's the object of the preposition. So, and it's not just crossing. After crossing what? Crossing the finish line. So this whole thing acts like a gerund phrase, and it's doing the job of object of a preposition. So I'm going to cut it out and glue it here. So I did 4 examples for you. You're going to finish this off. There's no exit ticket for this one. You're going to turn this paper in to me. If you need any help, ask.